How do you get to be a Marine major children's book author?
The idea behind it was I was just going to write it and just to connect with my children.
He's a Marine major and a children's book author. A dad who learned early that fatherhood isn't about being in the room, it's about being present in the moments that matter. That father is Olaolu Oganyemi.
All are truly leading humans, and everybody needs a different leading style because they are unique.
His story isn't a dramatic reinvention, it's something quieter and more powerful. A man paying attention, adjusting as he grows and choosing to show up with intention. Even when life pulls him in 10 different directions, he rebuilt his approach to discipline, trading force for guidance and teaching. He built small rituals that make a family feel steady even when he can't be home.
When you back somebody in a corner and you put your fist up, you should expect them to swing back. You can't get mad at them because they swung back. You literally put them there. You put them in a survival mode.
And after years of service, parenting, mistakes, course corrections, and growth, one idea keeps surfacing. Fatherhood isn't fixed. You get to write your own story.
Black dads spend more time with their kids and more time caregiving than white guys and Hispanic guys. What do you think the rest of us can learn from that community that's made you all so much better at it?
What you can do is you can create an environment where they actually feel like you care about them. You put your phone away and then you're engaged with them in such a way that now they're like, man, he truly does care.
All the research and data on parenting talks about the difference between consequences and punishment.
When I talk to parents about this, they automatically shut me off. They're like, oh, you're just a soft parent. You know, you're one of those new millennial parents and you just let everything go. And I'm like, that's...
In this conversation, he shares the lessons that shaped him, the moments that taught him who he didn't want to be, the rituals that helped his family stay connected, and the principle he hopes every parent will carry forward.
Do me a favor, man. Walk me through your life. How do you get to be a Marine major children's book author? Tell me where the streams cross for this.
Yeah, so I grew up in a house. I was the fifth of six children in Louisiana. So big family and all about teamwork, all about family and loving each other and things of that nature. These are things that my parents prioritized in our home. They also prioritized education. And so I was all about reading and enjoying moments with our children. And so really that's going to come into play later on when I decide to write children's books. But I truly believe that the Marine Corps aspect of my life came from, my parents just investing that time with me and being sticklers for things that they believed that were right, So if they wanted to teach us values and ensure that we're there for each other, ensuring that we're following through on the things that we want to do in life, and then making sure that if we want to do something, pursue it with all our might. And that's what my parents told me. And so that's really how I came up. It's just a very loving household. It's a household that they enjoyed bringing us together. And it's a household, they also had rules and they made sure that we abided by the rules. So I think a lot of that led to my career in the Marine Corps and later on being a children's book author.
Well, I guess the thing I'm curious about, right, education in your family makes a lot of sense after a conversation a little bit before we got on where you said your brother's getting a PhD as well, right? So clearly education and writing is important in your family. But children's books as a Marine, I'm still like, how did that happen?
Yeah, that goes back to, it's a couple of things. Number one, I was a very, very young father. So I graduated college, married at the age of 22, and I had a 3-year-old. That's how my origin story starts as an adult. So I was always trying to figure out, how can I be better as a father for my daughter? What can I do? And I just thought back to how my mom used to create those experiences with us when she used to read aloud to us. She used to read, especially Dr. Seuss. He made it easy for her. And she would just bring those stories to life. And we just enjoyed them so much that we all picked up reading. It just became a thing for us. So I just wanted to do the same with my daughter. And because I was, wanted to share that moment with my daughter and my children, I already started this idea that, why don't I try writing a story? I love, clowning around and doing things with my children. I used to want to be a rapper, so I know how to rhyme a little bit and a little rhythm. But, it's those things that truly made me want to become a children's book writer, just to connect with my children. And to be honest with you, the first book, Crow from the Shadow, the idea behind it was I was just going to write it and, I was just going to print it off my computer and have it with my kids. And I was like, you know what? I read that you can print on Amazon for free. So I decided to go through that process. And then once I printed there, I was like, you know what? There's probably some dads out there who want to do the same. So and the rest is just history. And then I decided to do exactly what my parents taught us before, and it's whatever you pursue, do it with all your might. And so, that's how we ended up here as a Marine and children's book author.
I just like these would traditionally be very disparate careers. And I think your story is indicative of we're moving to a place where men can be more than one thing, where our fathers really didn't have that option, right? You had the one career, you had the one focus, and I think it's beautiful that you're doing that, man. Sincerely.
Thank you. And I think that's one of the things, and I think our fathers had to do it in some ways. And I tell my dad this all the time
Mhm.
because there's times when he comes and he said, "Man, I wish I knew what you guys know at your age. Man, there's some things would have been." I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't even start that." In retrospect, hindsight 2020, all those kind of things sound great. But I need you to look at your track record, man. You have 6 children.
Like, look at where your kids are. They're
Exactly.
doing good.
4 boys, and to be honest with you, a lot of the friends that we chose, especially my oldest brother and me, some of the friends we chose, didn't quite make it out, and especially mine. I mean, I have a lot of my friends just didn't make it, beyond, high school. They didn't even graduate high school, and we were choosing that lifestyle. It wasn't that our parents condoned it or even encouraged it or even put us around, that kind of lifestyle. We just chose to act out because, I guess that was a thing to do, especially when you're trying to find yourself. But they remained patient with us. They kept teaching us and coaching us. And then it just sort of led, like I said, it just sort of led us down a path. To your point, I think our parents and our fathers, in some ways, they had this pension, and you had to be paid into this pension, otherwise you'll never get it. And my dad is one of those. He's in an annuity, so it's like, well, if I go somewhere else, I have to restart this, and I've built this up, and their careers were just so stovepiped. Whereas I think now we're just in a position where our careers aren't that stovepipe. I mean, we can, as we've already talked about, a Marine decided to be a children's book author, and my brothers are doing very, very similar things. So I think we're in a good place in society where we can actually pursue the things that we want to do.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to acknowledge, right? When we talk about kind of the lessons we get from our fathers, both good and bad, I think a lot of times people get wrapped up in just trashing how they did it when they did it, instead of acknowledging that this is the best they could do with the information and systems they had at the time. And anybody who doesn't believe that the majority of parents are doing the best that they can do isn't paying attention.
Not even close. And that's the biggest thing. It's looking at these parents and really, I always tell people, and every time I get an opportunity, so I'll take this opportunity, is just go thank a parent. There's many parents out there working hard, and they have worked their entire lives, sacrificed their entire lives. My dad is one, sacrificed his entire career moving to Louisiana, so he can have a safe place to raise a family. And that was because he started off in the Detroit area because they couldn't afford. He was teaching at Wayne State is where he started, but they couldn't afford good housing at the time, so they were in a little bit of a more of a rough area. And so he was like, I got to get my family out of here, and I can't wait 10 years until I work up the chain to where he wanted to be as a university president. So I need to make this sacrifice and go down to work in this university called Grambling State University, which I love. 5 out of 6 of us, I always make fun of my little brother. 5 out of 6 of us graduated from Grambling, so we have a lot of love for the university. But my dad went there because he wanted to sacrifice for his family. He went there not because it was a career booster, but because he wanted what's best for his family. So to your point, I think that's something that we need to make sure we do a good job of, is just going back and saying thank you. And in fact, once we finish here, I'm going to go ahead and call my dad and tell him thank you. And so I encourage everybody to do the same.
Yeah, I think we oftentimes when we talk about the role of fathers and where they're going, and we kind of denigrate that our fathers were really limited to being a provider most of the time. They didn't get to be dad very often. And I think it's important to acknowledge that that's not enough, that they were denied being dads, and it's wonderful that we're finding that again. And for most guys, being a provider is still important, right? Doing what you got to do to get your family where they need to go that's good work to do in the world. Well, so how has all this shaped the father you try to be with your kids now?
Yeah, so for one, I love what you're talking about there because I believe in many cases, having to work hard with your hands, whether it be on a farm, we grew up in the country, or whether it be any other job. A lot of those jobs required you to be gone for many hours. And so, one of the things that I learned is that when you're, really chasing your purpose and you're really working to provide for your family, you have to make sure that when you're home, you're home. You're home and you're present in your children's lives. You're finding ways to decompress from what you've been doing for the last 12, 14 hours and just dedicate. Because really, when you think about it, between work and school, you're really dedicating about 1 to 2 hours a day to your family. And that's not a lot of time. But when you have that time with them, you have to dedicate it to them because they're doing homework too. They want to go play with their friends, and you come home from work. There's things that you need to make sure that you're focusing on. And I think that's what I've learned as a father is that no matter how busy I get, even if I'm not physically here in the United States, I have to find time to call my family or write them letters or even hide little things around the house. So that way, later on, weeks later, hopefully, some point, there are sometimes that didn't work out and I forgot where I hid it and forgot to tell them and then come back and it's still there. But usually what happens is weeks later, days later, whatever, they go find it and they're like, man, this is cool. This is a cool note from dad. How did he know, that I was going to be sad today? Of course, I didn't know that. But I just left a note there in a spot to where I knew they wouldn't look for a while and they pick it up. And that just shows that you're thinking about them and you're engaged in their life. And I believe those are the things I learned just over time. It's just, fathers have to be a part of their children's lives. So it's like, okay, if I have to do it, then I need to make sure I'm being intentional about it. So that way I'm being intentionally present and not just doing something without thinking about it.
Well, I think that's even, I mean, it's important with around children generally, but I think it's even more important when we accept in the modern world we have limited time with our kids, right? Even for parents who aren't in the military, who aren't leaving the country, who aren't in jobs that are making them work 12 hours, their kids are still in school most of the day. You get them for dinner and you get them a little bit in the afternoon. And if you're lucky, you get them on the weekends, right? And so I love that the awareness of if I'm here, I need to be here. I need to engage and I need to be present.
Yeah, it's tough too because when I talk to a lot of dads and parents in general, one of the hardest things is, man, I want my time too. I want to decompress. And when you start counting hours, there's still only 24 in a day. The
You're like, I'm at 16. I guess I'm not sleeping.
Exactly. You still have that, that recommendation where people try to sleep somewhere between 6 to 8 hours, right? So you start looking at that
Mhm.
time. It's like, wait, if I'm gone 12 and I'm sleeping 6 to 8, my time is starting to dwindle down that I have for myself. And I'm not a person who says you shouldn't take care of self. Of course, I tell you prioritize that. But there's still the idea, it's that tension to say, okay, well, how do I balance, self care with it being present with my children and being present really with my family, not just my children, my wife, my husband, whoever. How do I balance that? And that's really, it's a challenge. And I know there's a tension that exists. But what I try to do with myself and I try to recommend to those parents is like, okay, well, create a schedule. I mean, there's nothing wrong with budgeting your time. I think sometimes it seems very regimented. And of course, it sounds like something a Marine would say, hey, budget your time and, like it's money. But I always recommend that because what you can do is you can create an environment where they actually feel like you care about them because you gave yourself that 30 minutes of just, if you want to go on Instagram and scroll for 30 minutes, then you gave yourself that 30 minutes to do it. And then you put your phone away and then you're looking at somebody, you're engaged with them in such a way that now they're like, man, he truly does care. And then you're able to recall the conversation from the day before and the day before because you were able to close out the task or the decompression or whatever you wanted to do for your own self-care. You were able to close that out and move on to focus on family. So that's usually what I try to do. I try to focus on, scheduling my time and just saying, when I'm done, say, okay, that's enough. Transition. I literally say those words, transition. So that way I can transition in my mind to the next thing, and which in many cases is spending time with my family.
Yeah, that's the most common tool that I use working with dads that are anxious. The guys that can't get work out of their head when they go home, the guys that can't get their kids out of their head when they're at work, making sure that you just give those transitions some time to happen, where you're being really intentional, where you've got some kind of pattern, some kind of ritual, something that you do to put things down in the in-between time. So that way you show up as the boss, leader, employee, the dad, the husband, the whoever, in the way that you want to, because those roles are disparate. I imagine when someone is talking to the major versus dad, it sounds a little different.
Yeah, it has to.
You made me think of something, and I'm curious of your thoughts on it, because we always talk about when we all get home. There's a lot of dads. If you were to look down the street, not just a lot of parents in general, you look down the street, you'll back up to the driveway, and if you just were to take a look, you'll see a lot of people just sitting in their car, 10, 20 minutes. And in my mind, because I used to do that when I first when I got off work after long days, I would sit in the car, and my family already knew it. Even if they're playing outside, they may come speak, and I'll say something to them real quick, but they would leave me alone and let me get my 10 minutes. And honestly, it was just 10 minutes of me sitting there. I could be listening to music. I could be, catching up on messages. I did try not to do too much social media in that time because depending on and sometimes my social media is curated perfectly to my dad jokes and some kind of humor or some dudes cutting their grass. That's usually what my,
But every now and
yeah,
then,
every now and then it presents some stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's too stressful for me. But I'm curious of your thoughts on that. Is that an effective tool for decompressing after a day to set that up 10, 20 minutes?
I think 10, 20 minutes in the car is a little long. What generally works for the guys I work with is it's about 5 minutes, but it's because before they leave work, they take a minute or three to put it down at work, whether that's creating a list of all the things that are happening first thing in the morning when you show back up on Thursday, whether that's just going through the tasks that you did and crossing them off in some way that kind of gives you that validation of like the work got done today. I'm good to go, rather than sitting in front of your house like for that long. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just think that if you kind of break that up and make the transitions of putting down and picking up as opposed to just one lump of transition. But everybody does it a little different. I mean, if it works for you, it works for you, right?
Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, I know this is just sort of a conversation. I just sort of reversed the question on you in a way, but it's just one of those things that as we think through it, and we're just always trying to talk to fathers and parents and learn more about the best ways or I guess good tools that they could use, especially when it comes to finding ways to just take off their major hat and then put on their dad hat, and then take that hat off and maybe put on the parent-child connect, and whatever those many hats that you're wearing. How do you decipher, or excuse me, distinguish those many hats, and what do you do? What is your ritual to do it? And so that's why I asked that question. So I appreciate it. That's a good answer.
And people discount habit and ritual, right? People don't like get uncomfortable when they say ritual, but all ritual is a habit that someone formed that forgot why, right? So it's just our minds aren't meant to do all the disparate and various things that we do now, and especially because our lives end up being so compartmentalized. And I think there's nowhere that that's really truer for than the military, especially now. Like I've got a good friend who was an infantry marine who had his hardest tour and his hardest battle 2 days before he held his son for the first time. And just the amount of strain on military dads that I'm sure you've experienced, right? Just being away from home, being around life or death, even when you're not deployed, right? That's what the job is. And then having to go home and listen to a 3-year-old talk about coloring flowers in the same day, right? It's tricky. As a Marine and a father who's done this, like you mentioned having a schedule seems to really help. What's another lesson that you feel like came through your service?
Yeah, so being authentic, both at work and at home, I think that's something that truly helped me out because they don't get the same version of me, obviously, but they still get me at work, right? They still get me at home. So my personality doesn't go anywhere. Of course, when you're having those conversations at work, you have the ability to just tell people, hey, here's the way I believe it should be done, but I'm curious of how you think. And I can come home and have that same kind of conversation with my children at their appropriate level. Of course, I wouldn't, you ask a 3-year-old that, be prepared to get a 3-year-old answer. But at the same time, you have the ability to have those kind of conversations. So I believe that one of the things that I learned, and it helps my transition, is just being authentic, being myself, and not trying to wear a mask between the two roles. I had that hard lesson because I did try to be like the knife hand Marine when I first joined as an officer. And I saw one of the Marines, I was told, one of my commanders came to me and told me that, hey, man, why are you making her cry? I'm like, well, I'm not making her cry. She's crying on her own. She's stepping in the way of my,
I didn't punch her.
she's stepping in the way of my wrath as an operations officer. And this is first couple of years in the Marine Corps. I'm like, well, operations officers are supposed to do that. That's what they do. And so I thought in my mind that was the right answer. I'm supposed to be out there knife handing and being demanding of people. When they don't say what I believe the commander wants them to say, I'm supposed to come down on them hard. And then that company commander looked at me and said, yeah, man, what are you talking about? Would you do that to your sisters? Would you do that to your brothers? Would you do that to your mom or
Anybody
anybody?
you
Right.
like, would you do
Would you
that?
actually lead like that? And I'm like, well, no. He's like, so why would you do that to her? Well, she's a Marine, sir. He's like, that doesn't mean anything. She's a human being, right? And that's where it started. And then it was like that moment. He helped me open my eyes, and I'm like, wow, that's the same thing that happened in my own home. I learned that lesson before, and it seemed like I had to learn it at home and at work, where I was talking to my daughter. And I got frustrated. I wanted to do the same thing when I got frustrated, that my parents may have done with me. They raised their voice, and I'm like, okay, now they're serious. And let me figure out what they're actually saying, because I ignored the other 10 times they said something. Now they raised their voice. Now they changed the tone. And I did that on my oldest daughter, and she broke down. And this is at she's probably 4. And when I saw her break, oh man, that broke my heart. I'm like, whoa. Okay, that's not the reaction that young Lou gave when he got his parents raised his voice at it. Why did she break like that? And I had to start learning, oh man, she's different from me, and I have to lead her differently. So for some reason, I had to learn that same lesson in the Marine Corps. And so those are the things that I had to learn. We are truly leading humans, and everybody needs a different leading style because they are unique. And that doesn't mean change who you are. It just means be authentic to who you are. Don't try to put on a mask to be someone else, and understand that everybody has different ways that you communicate and work along with them to get the best out of them.
Yeah, I think that the idea of a mask versus a hat, right? The hat matters, right? The role you're in, who you are to the person matters, but you're still you. And I mean, that story about you being the junior officer, I think anybody who's ever met a junior sergeant has seen him do the same thing, right? That's that trying to settle into what authority means and how to bring it into the world, right? And same thing with parents. And I see a lot of dads come in and the dads like to teach, right? Like I feel like I don't feel like the way that we have data around parenting is that men tend to be the ones that are getting their kids ready for the world. They want to teach them, they want to have boundaries, they want them ready. Moms tend to be the ones that make sure they're loved and safe, right? That's the nurturing end. And what dads forget is that good teachers don't yell at your kid, don't yell. Like like I've never been in front of a classroom that I've taught and yelled and had anything good happen. I have done it. It's not a good idea, but nothing good happened.
Well, it's because, and that's one of the things that, as you were talking about, that it reminds me of the word discipline. And because that's what, especially as a dad, especially as a Marine father, discipline is a real thing. And we want to, we think about that word, we think about, you do something wrong, you need to meet the consequence or the punishment for that action. But I did some studying on that word discipline, and I was surprised to see that the root of the word, disciplina, had nothing to do with punishment. Eventually, yeah, we sort of got there. But truly what discipline was about is it's about that teacher-pupil relationship, and that's what you're referring to. It's getting that pupil to accept the teacher's teaching. And so that doesn't mean hitting them over the head because they didn't get what you said, or saying, well, in order for you to get ready for life, I'm going to push you down the stairs because you need to learn that stairs are tough. No, it means teaching them to say, hey, here's a step. You need to step down one at a time, hold the rail, and getting them to understand your perspective. Is that frustrating at times? Of course it is, because you have to say it over and over. You have to teach them. And at times, my little brother, and he's the one, the second one out of the 5 of us or 6 of us that's getting a PhD. But, he told me one day, and I have to throw him out there, that, I just needed to bump my head for myself. And I was like, man, I've never heard that in my life. What are you talking about? Luckily, he's grown past that phase, but he did tell me that, and I laughed at him. But discipline, if I were better at discipline and helping him learn, then he wouldn't be telling me that. The reason he's resisting is because I've put him in a position where he feels like he has to fight. When you back somebody in the corner and you put your fist up, you should expect them to swing back. You can't get mad at them because they swung back. You literally put them there. You put them in a survival mode. So, and I think that's really what we had to start thinking about. I had to start looking at discipline to answer your question again. I had to start looking at discipline a different way. When you were looking at how to help children or Marines get to self-discipline to where they're applying your teachings without you being around, I realized that had nothing to do with punishment. It had nothing to do with emphasizing consequences, but it had everything to do with teaching them and helping them to understand why they're doing what they're doing. So these are the things that I had to learn. And I think that perfectly aligns with what you're talking about. When you're talking about going into a classroom and yelling at students, yeah, it may make you feel good at that moment, but in the end, it didn't really.
Just for the
Just for
moment.
the moment.
Just for that just that really short moment.
It probably wasn't effective in getting them to do what you want them to do, and it definitely didn't teach them anything other than when you get upset, you should yell, and that's not the lesson we necessarily want to teach our children. And of course, I'm not making fun of you because we all have done it and we do it.
I think that's the trick is, like, when you settle into having authority, you forget your weight, right? There's one thing when peers are, like, in a heated argument. There's another thing when a father, a teacher, a boss, an officer isn't a fit. Like, that's a very different feeling when someone has power over you, and I think we forget that. The all the research and data on parenting talks about the difference between consequences and punishment. And consequences are important. That's part of discipline, right? That's part of teaching. There's a natural consequence. If you do X, Y happens. And I love you, but Y is happening when you do X. Punishment is more about vengeance. It's more about power. And that almost never works for anything good. It's really good at containing things. It's really good at stopping things from happening, but it doesn't build relationship. It ruptures it, and it doesn't make for growth.
Yeah. I think that was one of the things that we were talking about when I talked to some parents about it, and we were just trying to help them decipher between consequences and punishment. And I thought it was hilarious because they're like, okay, well, I mean, the consequence for that action is then I do this, and I'm like, well, you can't tie the consequence to something negative. The consequence still has to match what actually is happening, right? You can't say because you got a bad grade, then I'm going to take your bed and make you sleep outside, right? That's yes, technically that by definition that you have created now a new consequence for that action, but truly the consequence for them getting a bad grade is not necessarily them having to sleep outside. You created that. Now, the consequence for them getting a bad grade is they may have to repeat the grade and they may have to repeat the test, but those are the true consequences. And it's really trying to find a way to bring that lesson to children because I think at times when I talk to parents about this, they automatically shut me off. They're like, "Oh, you're just a soft parent. You know, you're one of those new millennial parents, and you just let everything go." And I'm like, "That's if you knew me for 5 seconds, you'll know that's far from who I am." If you were to look at, it's funny because people walk in and they see my community rules that I've created for my household. And it's one of those things that they're like, oh, wow, your children have community rules. But I'm like, if you actually read it, then you'll see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to teach them responsibility and taking care of your own space, right? That's what it says. It talks about, the responsibility and ensuring that you prioritize things. That's what the community rules are. It's really setting them up for future, as you're talking about, which I have fully assumed of my role, setting them up for a future and saying, hey, if you start prioritizing having fun every day, that's fine. But just remember that if you don't work, you're going to have a lot of bills to pay. They're going to pile up and then your lights are going to start getting cut off. You're going to have all these things. If you don't organize your space, it's going to be tough for you to keep up with your homework or whatever else you're doing. And these are the kind of lessons we're trying to teach. So yes, we create rules, we create boundaries within our home. But we're doing it to teach them how to prepare them for life and teach them how to do things that we believe are important. And I know some people don't like the idea of making up your bed every day and saying that somehow is going to teach them a life lesson, but I truly ascribe to that. It 100% teaches them many lessons, one of which is having simple habits. It's saying that I'm going to wake up and whatever your habits are that you do every morning, I have something that I'm going to do every single day. And it makes it so much easier than when you want to create something to associate with those habits. Say if you want to meditate. Okay, well, I already know that at this time I make up my bed. It takes me 5 minutes. And then I know I have another blah, blah, blah after that. Well, now I can meditate during that from 5:55 to 6 a.m. These are the kind of things that it allows you to do because you've already established a habit. So those are just a couple of things that I've learned.
Well, it sounds like those habits are kind of a key component to making sure that you're still felt in your home when you're not there. By having some of these patterns established, by having the community rules established, by having the household operating in a way that is conducive for everything. Like, I like the community rules, right? That also, I'm imagining, there's rules for you and your wife as well, right? This is just what we're all trying to do together. And I saw that a lot from the better military dads that I worked with. Like, before I was ever a therapist, before I was ever a coach, I was a sergeant, and watching the dads that were happy and the ones that had happy kids. That's how it worked, is they prioritized their kids when they could, and they moved mountains to make sure they could at the important times.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're trying to emphasize in our home is that, yes, presence, I believe, is more than proximity. So it's more than you just being physically there. But then the other part is community. That's why I use that word community. I could say household rules, but I use community for a reason because I'm trying to get them to understand that you're always a part of something, no matter whether you're in this house or you're out at work or you're out in just anywhere. You're always going to have some form of community that you have to answer to, you should answer to. You're always going to have neighbors that you have to help out. You're always going to have some role to play. And in this case, for example, I was teaching about HOA. I was like, the homeowners association is always going to make sure that you are going to do things within the confines of the whatever the community that you're in. You have to answer to them, right? So these are the kind of things that you have to learn. There's always the idea of community and togetherness that we're trying to teach, but there's always that, and again, this could be a military-esque term, but there's that rules-based order that has to exist for a community to thrive. And that's just how I look at it. It's one of those things that you have to have some form of structure, some kind of rules and values and beliefs that you all ascribe to, so that way you can continue to go in the same direction. And that's where I truly believe that a lot of households could benefit from that if they're able to teach their children now that community is important and work alongside them. I believe they'll be able to benefit a lot more.
Well, that was the other thing that I was thinking of when I wrote down that question and I was thinking about it. The other thing that I remember from the military that was so powerful is you had all these parents that were coming in and out for all the deployments, the TDYs, all the different things that are going on, and other members then showed up, right? Another guy came and mowed your lawn when you were gone. Another mom helped get the kid to the second appointment, right? There was a lot more community engagement to make sure that the kids had what they needed, and it's much more of a village concept in the better ways that it's done. And I think, like I've talked about before on the podcast, it's losing that community aspect to child raising has been a huge disservice to everybody involved. It's why parents always feel like they're killing themselves. It's because you kind of are. No point in human history before industrialization was there ever a moment in time where one person or two people were responsible for everything a child needed, ever.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest parts, and as I talk to parents, one of the biggest things that I think we have to learn to get over is that lack of humility. And when I say that, I mean we have to learn that we know what's best for our child, but that doesn't mean we have all the answers. And that's where we have to understand. If we started accepting, and my parents taught me this, start accepting that, I'm not going to try to do everything. I'm going to provide for you. By law, I'm going to give you food, water, shelter, and clothing. But there's going to be many lessons that you learn outside this house. You're going to hear somebody say the same thing that I say. You're going to be walking down the street and that police officer is going to correct you and tell you that's not right. Your coach is going to tell you that's not right. And your coach is going to help mentor you and guide you and tell you what is when you're doing well. They're going to give you a high five. They're going to come back and tell me these things. And that little community that we had, I think as I started to have children of my own, I was like, man, where did that go? There's many times where the teachers, it's almost like two different lives. You talk to the teacher, and in some cases, the teachers are like, it's almost like, why are you talking to me? Why are you here at the school? I'm like, I'm just here to check on my child, see what you guys are learning. I want to be involved. I want to help them with their homework. I don't know this method of math you guys are teaching, so I'm trying to learn for myself. I've been watching YouTube so I can help them out and make sure I teach them in the way that you're teaching. I'm just trying to extend the home into the classroom and the classroom into the home. Why? Because I want to bridge that gap and ensure that we're all raising this child, because there's no way that my children are going to be successful if it's just me and my wife, because we're riddled with mistakes and we're riddled with things that we don't know and things that we don't even know that we don't know. So how can we say that, of the two of us, we know what's best at all times in every situation for our children? That just wouldn't make any sense. I think one of the hardest parts is
Well, and
protecting.
engaging with the schools with that is
Yeah,
huge. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, you're spot on. Engaging with the schools, yeah, it is huge.
Yeah, it's one of the better tools that I've found for helping dads navigate separation. So, particularly early in divorces, it's usually pretty acrimonious. It's a really hard thing to talk to your partner and co-parent. But the teachers, by the time you're split, and even if you're 50-50 custody at that point, the teacher probably spends more time with your kid than you do. And so if you can engage with the school, if you can engage with the teachers, you have a much better idea of what's happening with your kid, and they're more likely to tell you what's going on. Because the instinct for most teachers is to go to mom, right? Just because that's the way we're raised. We think something's going on with the kids, you go to mom. When it's 50-50 household, you need people to be coming to you. You need to be the parent, and it's a great way to engage on that. I love that you do that for your kids.
We can talk about that because divorce is tough. That's one of the ones that because it becomes so legal, it becomes such a business at that point that at times, I think we almost forget that we still need each other. That child still needs both of those parents. And I'm talking as a guy whose parents did separate and divorce. And so this is one of those things that my parents, they still, regardless of whether they divorced or not, they still ensured that they were a part of our lives. They still came to the games. They still talked to us. They still worked with us. To this day, they still mentor and guide us and coach us, both of them. And if you get into either one of them individually, they're not bad mouthing the other person. And that's after all the legal battles. That's after being married for, 20 plus years, right? So this isn't like a, 1 year, 2 year divorce. This is a 20 plus year, household building. And my dad's a pastor, my mom's been in the church. This is a family, true Southern family that came together, and now we're separating in an environment where divorce is like, it's taboo. Like, that doesn't happen. And right. So now you have this embarrassment, you have this legal bout, and you have all these things going on that truly contributes to, or I guess degrades our ability to be there for our children. And at times it can become almost like a competition where those children end up in the between. And so I truly believe that it is tough. It's one thing to have to get your own care as you go through it and you grieve the loss of your spouse. But it's also another thing to ensure that you understand that your children are now trying to adjust to the new normal, and it's just one of the things that you're just gonna have to work through. But in all cases, know that this still that community is going to be extremely important, and you also have to know that that community can be detrimental as well, because that community is going to choose sides. That community is going to say more than what you say, especially if you have some trusted friends and you may let them in on more information. They may say more than you say to your children. So it's those kind of things that we have to be aware of and continue to work through. It's tough. It's not something I would ever sit down and pretend that I have all the answers to. But I will say that, that community becomes even more important when you're in that kind of situation.
Yeah, that tends to be the hard part for a lot of dads that are navigating the separation, is that a lot of the social management of a family's life goes through the wife traditionally. And so for a lot of guys, they take their hands off the wheel way too much. And so when all of a sudden they're separated and they're divorced, they don't know who their kids spend time with. They don't have the phone numbers. They don't know who the teacher is necessarily. The teacher calls the mom, not them. And so getting them to start building that, to be part of that community if they hadn't been before, is key. It really helps bridge those gaps. And most of the time, the moms appreciate it. Like, I don't think any mother gets mad at a father for not doing as much as she does during infancy. Like, we can't breastfeed, right? That's not our bag. But if your kid's 5, you can make the dentist appointment. Like, you can get them to class. You can go get them the shoes, right? All of a sudden, if you're still not engaging in the way that they are, you're messing up.
Yeah, and I think one of our problems is we try to go for the big ones, right? And sometimes it's in our nature, right? When we first start for baseball, for example, when I started playing baseball, I wanted to go up there and hit a home run. The first time I ever swung a bat. That was, I mean, I had a dream. I was watching Sammy Sosa. I thought I could, Matt McGuire, all those guys that I had the jerseys, had the trading cards, all that stuff. And I wanted to grow up and I wanted to swing and hit a home run. No problem. That's what I wanted to do the first at bat. But when I hit it and I get a single, I'm like, that, that was anticlimactic. I just ran to first base, right? A guy didn't even make it home. That was anticlimactic route. And then you start doing it over and over. You're like, man, where's my home run gonna come? And I'm in T-ball. But that's just the way that we're thinking. It's like I have to do these home run things. I have to make these big moments. But in reality, to your point, is that a lot of times we need to focus on those little day-to-day actions because they seem little, but when you build them up over time, every baseball player that hits when he's at bat, he hits as many times when he's at bat, that builds his batting average. And when you have a high batting average, you're known for hitting when you're at bat and getting on base. You tend to get paid a lot more money. You may hit home runs. If every at bat, if every 10 I hit one home run, but all the other nine, I'm striking out. I don't think I would get a lot of money. I probably wouldn't be in the playing professionals, right? It's just it doesn't do anything, and I think that's where we have to start recognizing that those home runs, taking them out, and that's one of the things that as I was growing up, some of the times I used to get jealous of these young men and young women whose dads would sometimes do those home run things, around Christmas time when I'm wearing Skechers from Burlington Coat Factory and they're wearing brand new Jordans. I'm like, they got 2 or 3 pair of Jordans, they have cash and all these things, and I'm wearing the same old clothes. Meanwhile, my dad is at the school at our Christmas play along with my mom. He's making sure we're there. You look around, their dad may not, their mom, parents may not be there because they didn't deem it important. And so those are the kind of things we have to look at. It's those little things that we don't think are important, maybe a lot bigger than we think.
Mhm. Yeah, Scott Galloway talks a lot about that when he talks about parenting and that his best moments with his son is in what he calls the trash time. It's the conversation in the car on the way to the game. It's talking while they're doing dishes. You gotta just be there for it, and you gotta look for those opportunities while they're happening. And I think a lot of guys, particularly dads that are separated from their families, they feel like, "I want my kid to have something when I'm not there. I want him to look down at his feet and know dad got him those shoes." And I think there's some validity to that, right? Like you said, when you're not there, you hide stuff around the house a little bit, but don't let that distract you from the time while you're there. Don't let that knock you loose from the things that matter. It's tricky.
It is tricky, and it's because we sometimes we forget that those core memories. Thinking about, if people have seen the movie Inside Out, I love that movie because it
Yes, the first one nailed
Yeah,
it.
it did. Yeah, because those core memories that a lot of times we don't think about, those are the big moments in the child's life. Those are the things that truly matter. Yes, you can make a core memory out of, a pair. I don't have anything about Michael Jordan, don't get me wrong, but yeah, you could buy a pair of Jordans for your kids, and perhaps that becomes a core memory, or perhaps they mess them up and they run them into the dirt like my son, get them all muddy and tear them up, and you're just like, okay, well, nah, that sort of misfire. But man, what they enjoy if you were to go out there and get muddy with them and you have, tattered clothes and you're all ripped up but you're out there just having a good time. Those are the moments they never forget. My 6-year-old going on 7, she'll tell me that anytime. Oh, Dad, you remember that time? And in many cases, the secret is between you and me. I mean, I have no idea what they're talking about at times, and it's funny because my dad is telling me that now that he's gotten older. I've told him some of the things that he told me. I was like, yeah, man, you remember when you said that to me? Man, that he's like, "You know what? I'd be honest with you. You keep saying that." Like, when he made me cut my mohawk, he didn't make me technically. He talked to me and he influenced me to cut my mohawk. And he has no idea. He thought I just cut it. But I tell him, and when I talked to him about it, I was like, yeah, when you talk to me about this, what am I doing? How am I setting myself up for the future? How am I presenting myself? That really resonated with me. I appreciate you having that conversation. He's like, yeah, I don't remember that. Right. But because he was willing to have those conversations consistently, it finally made it through to my mind. And I believe that those, like the inside out core memories, those are what we're trying to make. But usually those are those normal everyday actions that truly build up over time and they become a core memory for our children.
Yeah. I think a lot of those moments that the way our memories work is it's amalgam, right? If it's not a traumatic event, it's this happened enough that now you have a memory of when you were young and it was like this. And then you might remember one of the conversations, but the reason it hits so hard is because either it was the only one and it was at a time when you really needed it, or it was just the consistency of the adult around you that taught you something. So I want to kind of come away from the military and into the Black community a little bit. So Black fathers are often framed as absentee fathers still. And there's a lot of individual responsibility put on Black fathers that was systemic and really, really hard. And what bothers me that that's still the narrative is that by the data, Black dads spend more time with their kids and more time caregiving than white guys and Hispanic guys, both when they're in the home and during a separation when they're out of the home. What do you think the white dads, Hispanic dads, and the rest of us can learn from that community that's made you all so much better at it?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I love that I can represent in this moment, because one of the things that I can tell you is that we learned that nurturing, though we've normally put it off to the mom, becomes a huge part of our lives. We know that our children, we have to be there for them. It's after watching it over and over, and you see a lot of guys out there that are talking about rewriting the narrative, rewriting the narrative. The reason we're saying that is because the narrative has been in place for so long and it's been repeated so long that it's become the norm in some cases, in some people's minds, excuse me. It's become the norm in people's minds. And the danger in it becoming the norms in people's minds is that we want to repeat it because that becomes the norm. So a lot of us are talking about rewriting the narrative. And that's one of the reasons I believe that you see the push of African American fathers in the home, just trying their best to just be present and trying their best to work alongside their children, because we realize that they don't have, in many cases, the same opportunities that may exist. So it may get one shot to throw it away. I'll give an example. I've been in many rooms where people will look at me and they talk about how aggressive I look. I'm a guy that, and if people don't know, one of the biggest things that my most enjoyable thing is working with children, right? So I go to schools, I read to children, I do all these things, and not once has a child run away from me. But if you want to know how many adults have looked at me and said, "Oh, man, why are you? Oh, you're angry again?" And I'm like, "Angry again? First of all, you've never seen me angry. Second of all, the second ago, this guy was basically standing on the table yelling and cursing. I just had a firm statement, one firm statement, and you're saying I'm angry." And so I realized that there's this narrative not only in the African American community but in other communities, and we're always looking to confirm or deny biases. In many cases, we're looking to confirm the biases in our minds, and so I think that's really one of the things that we're pushing for, is trying to rewrite that narrative. And so the important thing is just saying that, hey, our children need us. So the biggest thing is just show them that, this is the right answer. This is what's actually happening. Whatever you're seeing and hearing on even some of the movies in the entertainment industry that we are creating, whatever you're seeing there, it's not necessarily everybody's story. In fact, as you're talking about, it's not many people's story. It's just a story, and it happens to be the juicy story, and it happens to repeat the same narrative that has been told for many years. And so, a long way of saying that I truly believe that just finding those times with your children, taking the load off your wife and saying, "Hey, I am important. I know I'm important in your life, so I'm going to be in there, be in the trenches with you."
hmm No, I think that fighting that narrative as a component of trying to rewrite the story of fatherhood in that community is we can learn a profound amount, because one of the big pushes that we're seeing with just fatherhood in general is all the science says, like, for the longest time it was accepted that small children didn't need fathers, that the mother was the most important thing for a small child. And what we're finding is they're both incredibly important. A number of important things happen when dads are around that don't happen when they're not. And so I think the more that we become educated on that and the more we recognize that that narrative is bullshit, the more guys will push on it just like you all have managed to. And the fact that you all have made that kind of progress after all this nonsense in your way is it's I think it's gonna be helpful if we can pay attention.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, because you put it back into the military context, for example. A lot of people were telling me, officers aren't involved. Officers, they just go and play golf and all these things. And I recall that being a thing when people told me that. And I'm like, first of all, my golf swing is terrible. And I've never actually been invited to a golf tournament that was during work hours, unless it was on a Friday where everybody got off early anyway. And so it's one of those things that I truly believe that is, once we realize that we do have a role to play, just like the officer in the military, just like the manager in the workplace, everybody knows those roles and they're like, oh, you have to be there. If you're not there, things can happen and it's on you because you're the person who's in charge. You have that responsibility. Once we take on that same kind of ownership in our homes as fathers, I truly believe that's when the switch will happen. It's like, okay, well, if you're saying that I'm now responsible for my child, especially in the formative years, I'm responsible for teaching them and helping them understand how to view life. And as we already talked about, teaching them what life is like, how to learn those hard life lessons. And I have to do that in those formative years instead of just leaving it to the mom to deal with the terrible twos and the or the terrible threes or whatever. I think we've extended it beyond two now to like threes or fours. But once you start working through that, you're realizing that, oh man, this is truly a thing that we have to be a part of that. You take ownership of it. I think that's when I would put the switch on. The switch would come on in our brain and say, okay, yeah, I have to be there. So I'm going to rewire everything that I thought. I just go out, drag the animal back into the home. I cook it, or don't know. The wife cooks it. I go somewhere else and go drag another animal in. Those days are long gone. Those are the caveman days that I'm referring to. Now your role in the house is much bigger than that. And the second we start realizing that, it's the second that we start seeing even more of a positive change in our society.
Yeah, I think the lesson of time being more or equal, at least equally as important as the providing. That I've never met anybody I've worked with whose parent wasn't stuck in addiction or wasn't some kind of monster to them that wishes their dad had worked more. Like, I've talked to hundreds of men at this point. Freud was right. Your parents matter. Comes up a lot in therapy. Very rarely has it ever occurred where someone with a reasonably healthy childhood said, "Man, I wish dad worked more so I could have gotten that car earlier."
Not a single one. I mean, and every parent I've talked to, I'm not a therapist, and I want people to understand that. But I do work with parents because that's part of what we do. And every parent I've talked to, it's the same way. And every child I've talked to, especially in the military communities, that's one of the first things they talk about. When I'm reading to these young men or women, they stand up and say, "Man, can you come to my house and help my parents, help my dad? When he comes home from work, he's X, Y, and Z." They always talk about. That's one of the things that I notice. When they start talking about their dad, because I'm standing there and I'm assuming that they sort of relate me to their father. The first thing they talk about is when my dad gets home from work, which validates what you're saying. They're not talking about, hey, when my dad is gone at work, he's able to buy me these things. He's talking about when my dad gets home from work, he's going to do, or I hope he does, dot, dot, dot. And so that means that the child is looking forward to you coming home from work. And as an adult, they're still going to look forward to you coming home and mentoring them and guiding them. When I call my dad today, if he's in his office, I'm like, "Hey, what are you doing? Still working? Go home." And it could be, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And of course, I'm just picking on him. But I'm like, "Hey, what are you doing at work? Hey, go home. Yeah, I want to talk now. Let's have a conversation." There's no way that we're going to say that I want him to work more. I wish that he'd work more, even as a family, with a large family. And there are times when you open the cupboard and we're like, "Man, there's nothing here. What's going on?" But at the same time, I still never wish that, oh, my dad, I wish he'd have worked more. Because if I say that, then I'll have to deny the fact that he was investing in us and making sure that we stayed in school and making sure that our grades were up and making sure that every last one of us got a full ride to college. All six of us had a full ride to college. How did he do that? Because he invested time with us to ensure that he was teaching us and ensuring that we had the education that we needed and the focus that we needed instead of being derailed. And so that's one of the things that I don't wish my dad. Of course, if my dad was, made a lot of money, I wouldn't say, "Oh man, you know what? I wish he didn't made less money." No, I wouldn't say that. But at no point do I look in the rearview mirror and say, "Man, I wish he could have given me, 40 acres and give me all these things." No, I appreciate him for teaching us the lessons that he taught us so that now I can do the same for my children. And oh yeah, because I got a leg up because I was able to, not go into debt for college. Now I have all those funds that, a lot of people are dedicating to their education. now I can set that out for my children's success. And now it's just going to continue from generation to generation. And I believe that's how you change generations. I think a lot of times we look at it as a generational curse. I put that in quotation marks for a reason. In many cases, it's things that we have the ability to impact. We just have to make the decision to do it.
Yeah, there's a meme that was running around a while ago where it shows like a 4 sets of parents to their kid, and the first parent's dealing with all this pain, and it's just vomiting up on the kid, and then the one before the last kid is just braced against it, and the kid's happy. Like, I think there's healing that happens both for the person that's been hurt and the community at large when you help those kids not go through what we went through, whatever it is. I think it's important. I wanna be really respectful of your time. We've gone through a lot, man. I think there's a lot of good things in this episode. I hope the guys heard what they needed to. If there's one thing that you wish every parent knew that they don't, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, if I had to just choose one thing, number one, don't believe every narrative out there. Find a way to write your own narrative, write your own story. That's really the focal point of everything that we talk about is that we have control of our own destiny. So feel free to write your own. You have the pen. So write your new life story. And then the second thing is, again, presence has nothing to do with proximity. Find ways to invest in your children's lives. And if you don't have children, find ways to be a part of another community. And what that looks like for me, as I was able to grow through insecurities myself, is because I had coaches who were helping to get through, sports and things of that nature. I had, the drill for former Army Sergeant First Class who's doing drill team at my church, and he helped me through a lot of things. And so find a way to invest back into the community, no matter whether you're a parent or not, just invest in these children.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I love the narrative aspect of that. Like, so many dads I work with come in, and a lot of what they're complaining about is what people say about them being fathers. The wife doesn't like that I'm doing this. She says I don't do enough. The teacher said this. My boss said this. And the work always comes back around to, well, what are you doing? Do what you need to be doing. And either they'll change what they say or not, but you'll know. And your kids will know. And that's the best you can do. You can't change someone's mind that isn't wanting to change.
That's all that matters. That's all that matters. What are you doing? And it's not about, and I love that you said that, and that's a perfect spot to highlight is that, if we allow people to continue to, if we always rely on opinions and what people are saying about us, we will never be happy. It reminds me of another a meme. You're talking about memes. There's a meme of a guy and his wife walking, his pregnant wife with a donkey. And in one case, they both were walking beside. He's like, man, they should, why aren't they using a donkey? And then he puts his wife on the donkey. They're like, oh, wow. He put his wife on the donkey. He's such an idiot. Then they both get on the donkey. They're like, wow, they're overworking the donkey. There's too much weight. And then he puts himself on the donkey, and people are like, wow, I can't believe he's on the donkey and not his wife. And so it's always going to be some kind of negative opinion out there. But we just have to do what we believe is best for our families.
No, I think that's a good spot to pin it in. So we started with you. I like that this is going to come back around to you. And I imagine you've got some unique lessons here. So the purpose of these stories is to help kind of normalize some of these things, right? We know that culture matters and the way that we show up in the world as men matters, but we don't often get to hear guys talk about what that looks like for them in their world. And that's what we're trying to do with these. So for the first one, what's a truth about masculinity that you learned before you were 12 that's remained true until today?
Yeah, there's a such thing as healthy competition. Yeah, when I learned that at a young age with my brothers, we always pushed each other to get stronger and better. We always wanted to be the ones who got straight A's. And when we weren't getting straight A's, it wasn't just making fun of each other and picking on each other. It was, man, how can I help you? And then you get back up there, it's like, okay, well, you got a 98, I got a 99. And we're constantly working together to make each other better. And that's just a small example, but that's just how we were. We were just wanting to help each other out and just be more competitive. And that was just who we became. And I believe that was huge when it comes to masculinity and what we expect from our young men. It's just understanding that healthy competition can help you not only become more resilient, but help you succeed in the future.
Oh, I love that, man. I think the idea of healthy competition in most cases is competition without dominance.
It
And I
is.
think that's where people kind of mess it up, right? Everybody wants to be Tom Brady. And at Tom
Mm,
Brady's level, yeah, man, it is about dominance, but most of us aren't in the NFL, right? For the rest of us, it's, yeah, man, have somebody that's making you better that you make better.
right.
I think that's wonderful that you and your brothers have that. It's fantastic. All right, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on and talking about all this. I I can't tell you how astounded I was to find out you were in the world. I never expected to meet Marine major that was doing children's books. I am completely unsurprised, however, that you're starting up on a leadership book. When is that going to come out, and where can people find it?
Yeah. So I'm supposed to be coming out. It's supposed to be coming out in June of 2026. Right now,
Okay.
it's going to be in my opinion, it's a very strong book. It talks about the counterintuitive principles of becoming a leader. So it's for those emerging leaders who just want to be better at what they do. It's a concise guide because I understand that a lot of us just don't have a lot of time to dedicate. Although I'm a huge advocate for reading, I love reading books. But a lot of us don't want to dedicate that time. So it's very concise. And we just study
Mhm.
how we can become more effective leaders. And so that book's called Lead Last, and it's supposed to be coming out in June of 2026.
Nice, man. I'll see if I can use that to leverage you to come back on, and we'll have another conversation.
Absolutely, anytime.
All right, man. You take care. And that's our conversation with Major Olaolu Ogunyemi. We're so lucky he's in the world, and I'm really, really happy to have met him. The podcast has been so great for meeting interesting and wonderful men doing great work in the world, and he's no different. We're really lucky to have had him. As always, we like to fact check here, and as per normal, I'm the one that messed up. So there were 8 key facts that we were worth covering and doing a little bit of research on to make sure we got right. 3 of them need a little bit of work. So the first one is I commented on ritual just being a habit, and that is a gross oversimplification for what ritual is. While they're absolutely connected and the habit of ritual has psychological impact, it's important to acknowledge the spiritual and cultural impact of shared ritual with folks. So sorry about that. Sorry for trying to dismiss that. Certainly wasn't my intention. The next one is I said that science for a while said that you only need mothers as small children. That was never the case. Science, at its earliest in the behaviorist world, talked about fathers being a secondary relationship, but they certainly never spoke to them being unimportant. And the reason this happened is because of what happens with a lot of good science. It gets politicized, it gets used by people who don't know what they're doing, and becomes the common story. So there we are. I fell into the common story just like the folks at the time. And that hasn't even been true since the 70s. Ever since the 70s, all the behaviorists have really been kind of crying from the rooftops about the importance for fathers. We as a culture just didn't listen. So let's give credit where it was due and give the scientists the credit that they earned. They got it right, we got it wrong. The last one that could use some clarification is I overstated men and women as parents. I did what I'm trying to convince everybody else not to do, which is to say men and women instead of masculine and feminine. Nurturing happens across the board, but we know that masculine parenting is more teaching, boundaries, and alignment with the world to make sure you're ready. Feminine parenting is a little bit more about belonging, being loved, being cared for. But both sets of parents do each, and it's not about whether it's a father or a mother. Every household has a different blend of these things. The importance is to acknowledge that men tend to like one a little bit more and women tend to like another one. Women tend to like the other a little bit more. The other thing that's important to notice is that the modern data really says a lot of that is culturally driven. If you look at various cultures around the world, we're finding more and more that men take on more nurturing roles than we do here in the West. So, worth noting, and again, I'm so sorry about that. It's something I'm really working to convince other people of, but I guess it goes to show you how ingrained it is in us that the guy trying to convince folks still messes it up. The other 5 are backed by research. If you're curious about what they are, make sure to go look at the show notes where we have full APA citation, as always, backing up the information we're giving you. If you're a regular here, you likely noticed some changes in this episode. Thanks to the traction that you all have been giving us and sharing and listening, I decided it was time to improve the podcast. We went from having one really dedicated, fantastic video editor to a whole team of people, to include a fact checker, which is really exciting for me because I can't tell you how hard it's been to fact check myself. Let us know what you like. I'm really excited to be working with these folks. I think they're doing great work, and I hope you like the changes. And more than anything, we want this to be more and more useful for you. So leave us a comment. Let us know what you like that's changed, what you didn't like that changed, and what's just whatever. Your feedback is going to be key to helping us continue to make these as good as we possibly can for you. Thanks so much for being here. This has been American Masculinity in our 33rd episode. Make sure to join us for our 34th, where we talk about how to get the most out of working with a female therapist. We'll see you there.